There's an emergency in the Cosmoverse. Who can save us? Next up on stage is the founder of IXO, Dr. Crypto!
We'll have a... So, who thinks that the Earth is fucked? So I'm going to be talking about the consensus we have about this and other things, and the protocols that can change the state of Earth, and how we finance those state changes, and build an ecosystem with a big DAO, and the program through which we can systematically make all of this happen. So the geophysical records of our planet keep state, including the trees. And so they're good records of the changes that are happening, and there's consensus in the planet. There's also consensus happening at the moment in Glasgow with the Global Climate Summit. How many of you are following that? And essentially the consensus is that we are fucked, but that we can get our way out of it if we do things quickly and change the state with some very specific and determined actions. And so last year, at the virtual Cosmos event, I showed this slide, and it's really saying that we have future states, and we decide which future state we want for the planet. These are some memes coming out of Glasgow, and I think that we'll be hearing more of them. The race to resilience, about societal state change. The race to zero, which is economic state change. And the race to regeneration, which is ecological state change. And these transitions are the big transitions that we need to make in the coming years. And the coming years are really short coming years. It's really, counted on like one or two hands. And so the cost of this is going to be huge. So the societal state changes for resilience is going to cost hundreds of billions. The transition to a zero carbon economy is going to cost trillions. But these are also economic opportunities. They're not only costs. These are new economies that are going to drive the future of what our planet looks like. I think yesterday, some of the largest capital allocators and financial institutions made the Glasgow finance pledge to put $130 trillion of capital into zero carbon investments by 2030. So the needle is really shifting. So where's that going to go? How's it going to be proven that it got there? What changes is it going to make? And on the ecological side, which Gregory's going to speak about, we have the opportunity to change the Earth, or it's going to cost us the Earth. So around a year ago, I presented an idea to Ethan and the InchChain Foundation around what is the purpose of our Internet of Blockchains. Our Internet of Blockchains. What's the real purpose of this? And we've come to a consensus that Earth state change is the big purpose here. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So how do we make Earth state change happen with blockchains? It's about the protocols. And blockchains enable reality to exist within software. This is an important concept. So we have chain state validated on the one side, we have our state machines, and then we have Earth state verified. So this can apply to finance, it can apply to data, it can apply to the services, digital services, physical services, and to any other sort of change that we want to encode and make happen. So the protocols need to connect what happens on-chain with what happens in the world. So how do we connect Earth state to chain state? So we've been working on the IXO Protocol for a number of years now. And this is based on very pragmatic ways of applying the new standards out of the W3C, which we've been involved in as part of the community producing these standards around decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and related tooling. And so what these standards allow us to do is to identify with decentralized identifiers, which are cryptographically verifiable and can be authenticated, to create claims about any observations about the state of the world, and to verify those claims in a way that produces proofs that can be bundled together, maybe optimistically rolled up or whatever, into non-fungible tokens that can be representations of the outcomes, the state changes that happen in the world. And so we can use these outcomes, these tokenized outcomes, to drive the finance. So the concept of sustainable and regenerative finance is DeFi that holds state relevant to the world. We connect the state of the world to the state of the chain. And for this, we need to have some more sophisticated NFTs than what we've seen before. And so we've been working on a standard for NFTs, which is called the Interchain Identifier Standard, with support from the Interchain Foundation. Billy Renenkamp sort of instigated this work, and we're continuing it under the program. Essentially, we have a standard now for identifying these assets with interchain identifiers, which are DIDs, which have all the usual DID components like the cryptographic controls and service definitions and so on. But we've added to this linked resources which enable us to have verified data, verified claims that get embedded into the token, and then rights. So rights that can be executed on-chain, off-chain, using cryptographic methods that may mediate access to those to services, for instance. So this can be around land usage. It can be around deriving shares of an NFT into fungible tokens. I mean, it's really use your imagination. And so when we can embed linked resources that give us representations both of the state change, for instance, trees were planted with the carbon sequestered, or carbon costs, or any other representation relating to carbon, we now have a very powerful asset which embeds in it the carbon and the world state changes. And this can be used for creating state change representations about all kinds of outcomes. And the ones that are familiar to us, obviously, carbon credits, and but we can really go across anything that we would have represented as certificates, education certificates, immunization certificates, you name it. And really this can apply to anything, any verified outcome state that we care about, that we're willing to fund, we're willing to purchase, we're willing to invest in, and then take these states and put them into all kinds of business and financing processes. So they can be built into financial transactions, into business processes, and so on. And this is relevant across all sectors of society. So we can go beyond carbon tokens to education tokens, health tokens, etc., all relevant to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which really encompass all aspects of the economy. So how do we then bring these state representations, these tokens, into financing mechanisms? At IXO, we've innovated alpha bonds, which are risk-adjusted bonding curves, so algorithmic market makers, which enable us to form capital and price that capital dynamically based on signals that are coming through from the real world. So the bond becomes an interface between what's happening in the real world and what's happening on chain. And as the price changes, that changes behaviors in the real world. And as behaviors in the real world change, they feed back through the alpha and adjust the price of, oh, I think I've just lost my voice. Adjust the price of the capital. And so this becomes a machinery that can be utilized for the production of these tokens, of the outcome tokens, and can sustainably finance all kinds of projects. And it's a very versatile crypto economic primitive, developed and validated through the research that we did together with Block Science. And so an example of how we're using this is as an impact bond mechanism in India, together with UBS, a large Swiss bank. And this is our AlphaBond pilot for primary education adaptive learning technologies. So we have 500 households that have received tablet devices. There's a learning program on there. As the kids use that tablet, it generates signed claims to say this tablet was used, the child's achieved the next level of learning. And so these get packaged together and they'll go through that bond process to produce the education tokens, which can then be sold in the market. The verification on this, just out of interest, so this is independently done by a service provider in India who comes in and tests all the kids. And here we see the results that, of the testing that took place last month. These kids in grade 2 are currently at like 0 education level because of what happened with COVID. So what we're expecting to see at the end of 12 months is a dramatic shift. And if that happens, the bond pays out. There's an outcome payment, which has a coupon value. And so that creates the verified outcome state of educated children. And so when we begin to think about these state outcomes in terms of this model of like how is this affecting the resilience of communities and societies, education is important, health is important, job creation is important. All of those SDGs are important. If done in the right way, they can contribute to green economy if we can reduce the carbon costs or get people to do things differently, and also impact on the ecology. So each of these is part of the solution. Education is part of the solution, health is part of the solution, industrial production is part of the solution if done right. So with IXO, we're on the roadmap looking at how to incentivize these mechanisms using the yield farming DeFi mechanism. So directing some of the proof of stake rewards into incentivizing and rewarding bonds that achieve those outcome states. So we'll have a curated collection of outcome states that qualify for yield rewards being minted or being directed into these bonds. And so the objective function of the network, of the impact hub, can be driven towards outcome states that through governance are determined to be or decided to be important. And we think this could be a really important way of creating new types of incentives for flowing capital into these kinds of production processes. Now, here's a bit of a kind of moonshot idea. So when we hear about carbon accounting and the way that the people are talking about it at the COP, there's terminology such as the carbon intensity of dollars. So if you put in $1 million into a project, what's the carbon intensity? How many, how much carbon per dollar does it cost to make this investment? And so there are carbon costs associated with the spend. We can look at the flip side of that, where we can say, well, if you don't emit carbon, you can get carbon profits, or you can get dollar intensity, which is the dollars saved for the carbon not emitted. Now, what if we bring all of this accounting on-chain and make it automated? And we can do this because of the standard. So if we embed both the claims about outcomes of education with the costs of producing that outcome state. So, if I was educated by being flown across the world to go and do my education and attend a course where I have to do 4 flights a year to go to Harvard, it's going to have some carbon costs. We can do all kinds of interesting things with this. We can also bring subsidies in, so some of those impact mitigation or resilience funding that is going to come from the rich nations to the poor nations can be built into these transactions. And I'll come back to that in a minute in terms of how we think we can achieve that. So the vision is about a future which has trillions of Earth tokens, which fundamentally creates a new type of economy, the tokenized Earth economy. And this has billions of users. So how are we going to drive the adoption of billions of users? Well, it's about changing the narrative about money. Now, there's a consensus that was created through the UN Task Force on Digital Finance for the Sustainable Development Goals, bit of a mouthful. So in August last year, this task force, which was directed under the Secretary General of the UN, came out with a report which is titled People's Money. And the fundamental conclusion of this report is that the thing that's going to shift the needle is enabling people to spend their money, save their money, invest their money, and pay taxes in ways that are going to change the economy. So how does that happen? Well, the call to action of this task force was that we need digital finance ecosystems which are going to make these capabilities accessible to people, give people information, give people the tools, the means of transaction, and so on. And so what we've committed to through the Earth Program is that Cosmos will be and is the leading sustainable digital finance ecosystem. And we're going to hear a bit more about that in a minute. So what about thousands of Earth DEXs? Earth DEXs where the offsets are automated. So those tokens have a cost embedded in them, and when we do the exchanges, when we buy a token or we sell a token, we can automatically take off the carbon costs, and the carbon accounting can be automatically done. Now, if we think about this as a grudge purchase, I have to go and buy some carbon tokens, I take my flights, and it says you have an option to offset. It's a very different dynamic to the one that we've seen happen. Maybe it is a grudge, but we still do it. In Ethereum, we pay exorbitant gas costs. And you kind of go, well, do I really want that NFT? It's $100 to pay the gas fees. I really want it. I'm going to pay the gas fees. It's fine. And that goes to the miners. Well, what if we have these costs embedded into these products these digital products that we're trading, and it automatically offsets through the DEX mechanism? So this is something on the roadmap. We'd love to get some help with building it out, and there's super smart people in this ecosystem and this community who can help make this happen and help get these kinds of DEXs to be available in thousands of places. So to fund the growth and to enable building out of these technologies, we're launching the Earth DAO. Now, the Earth DAO will initially be funded by 40% of the token supply from IXO, so 40 million tokens. And the model that this DAO will implement in terms of funding is based on the Web3 sustainability loop, which Trent McConaughey should take credit for. And this is really about enabling an evergreen funding mechanism. So some of the fees that come from the usage of the protocols goes back into the DAO, and then gets used in a way that the technologies that get developed enable lower cost structures and better ways of producing these tokenized products, the Earth tokens. And so as the cost comes down and as the variety of these tokens become more, we begin to see more impact, more trades on these because there's more kinds of tokens available, more choices, and capital will then come in to support those trades. And so we have a virtuous cycle that will provide a sustainable growth mechanism for the builders who are creating the applications and related services around this whole economy. So just in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk a bit about the Interchain Earth Program. So this is a program funded by the Interchain Foundation. It's one of the two main focus areas of the foundation, focusing on R&D, partnerships, advocacy, and education, with the purpose of empowering people everywhere with the digital technologies for creating sustainable economies that enable communities to prosper, to regenerate the planet, and to respond to the climate crisis. And so IXO has taken the lead in implementing this program in partnership with Regen And we're looking to expand that partnership to invite all others to come and join and become part of the mission and see how you can contribute to creating this leading sustainable digital finance ecosystem. So we've got some specific areas of focus, obviously around Earth tokens, around tokenized local currencies, self-sovereign identity, user access. We just recently announced a partnership with the Opera browser company, which has hundreds of millions of users and is a major channel to the markets in important markets in Africa and Asia. Earth DAOs and governance, and then zero emissions blockchain infrastructure. And so these are currently the areas in which we're working and progressing research and development and leading towards new products, new ways of thinking, new protocols, and building out this metaverse. So the Cosmoverse becoming the Cosmos Earth metaverse. This is our Miro board currently, and we would love to see more projects within Cosmos coming into this orbit. So what are the capabilities that your project has at the level of software, protocols, and so on, at the level of the human talent in your teams, in terms of the market access that you have and the applications? So how can we bring components of that into this, into building up this capability of our ecosystem to be the leading ecosystem for the Earth mission? So to keep abreast of all of this, we've launched the Earth State Intelligence platform, and I encourage you all to join this. Currently, it's a weekly briefing. It's kind of an insider briefing and a collection of kind of what we think is important and happening in sustainable and regenerative finance and the tokenized impact economy. And increasingly, we're wanting this to become a member and community-driven information sharing and intelligence gathering platform. For those of you who've seen the first 8 or so editions, I think we're building up some really good narratives and insights into what's happening in this whole new space. So I invite you all to join the Interchain Earth mission. There's some specific ways that you can do that. Sign up to the Earth State platform. Participate in the hackathon. So we have a category, the Earth Prize, with a number of great challenges there, and we think that can help accelerate parts of the building out of what I've described today, and also bring new ideas. Tomorrow we have an unconference, and for those of you who have got your tickets, looking forward to see you there.